Well, Stephen Miller joined J.D. Vance on Charlie's show today, and he made perfectly clear that the administration intends to dismantle the political groups that are fomenting political violence and hatred throughout this country. Watch this.
We are going to channel all of the anger that we have over the organized campaign that led to this assassination to uproot and dismantle these terrorist networks. So let me explain a little bit what that means. The organized doxing campaigns, the organized riots, the organized street violence, the organized campaigns of dehumanization, vilification, posting people's addresses, combining that with messaging that's designed to trigger and incite violence, and the actual organized cells that carry out and facilitate the violence. It is a vast domestic terror movement. And with God as my witness, we are going to use every resource we have at the Department of Justice, Homeland Security, and throughout this government to identify, disrupt, dismantle, and destroy these networks and make America safe again for the American people. It will happen, and we will do it in Charlie's name.
Amen to that. Well, here to discuss this and more is my friend and friend of the show, Kyle Shidler. Welcome to the show, Kyle.
It's always a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Matt.
It's sadly you are without Jill today. It's just me solo, but we have a lot to discuss. I know this is something you work on, you are working on. This is something that you spoke about this issue way back in the BLM days, and I believe wrote about it, what needs to be done to go after these activists, domestic terrorist groups in this country. And what's astounding to me that, it's sad that we have to be here now after this horrific tragedy and talking about it again. I hope that something is actually done, but please explain what sorts of things should be done.
Well, I'm very heartened by what Stephen Miller had to say, and it sounds like they're on the right track. The challenge I think that they're going to have is getting the federal bureaucracy in alignment with what needs to be done. First and foremost, they're going to need to get the federal bureaucracy to accept that there is such a thing as far left extremism, that there's a category for it which they can put such acts into. They're going to need to get the federal bureaucracy to define what it is. And then they're going to have to orchestrate all elements of government power to take it on.
Well, wait a minute.
Let's
just slow down a minute. So it's harder than it sounds, because if I'm just common sense American listening to you right now, I'm saying, wait a minute, wait, what? They don't have a category for leftist violence? Like there's no radical extreme left category for them to go after? What are you even talking about?
Well, so the federal government dumps pretty much every anti-government extremist into the same category. They have anti-government and anti-authority violent extremists. And that could include everything from your very far right sort of lunatic survivalist somewhere in the woods who thinks the government is out to get him, which might usually be put on the right. And it could hypothetically also include your left-wing anarchist cells, your Antifa types. They would both be covered under the same category, theoretically. The problem with that is because you have such a broad category, the federal bureaucracy essentially gets to decide how it's going to spend its time. Furthermore, they divide up far left extremism under other categories as well. So, for example, your pro-abortion extremists and your pro-environmentalist extremists all get put under different categories as if they're a totally separate thing. And the reality is that very often they're the same people, or they move from one side to another. You take a look at somebody like Unity of Field's Calla Walsh. This is somebody who's been active in pro-Palestinian sabotage events and is now running a terror propaganda network where they openly laud the killing of Americans and Israelis, as took place when the 2 Israeli embassy staffers were killed. They lauded that attack. And now this is somebody that has advocated on behalf of the Cuban government. They participated in BLM activities. They also participated in environmentalist direct action protests and the like. So you have one individual who, if you're following the federal government's categories, would be spread out under a variety of different categories, and they would be treated as if they weren't all the same thing. So what we need to do is get the federal government to recognize a category of far left violent extremism and put under that category all of your anarchist, autonomous Marxist, your Marxist-Leninists, your Maoists, your violent socialists, and the like, and say these are all one thing. These are all a movement that is working towards revolution in the United States, that's working towards the overthrow of the United States government, and we're going to take them on. But as long as they remain divided up as if they're somehow a totally different thing, you're able to ignore the fact that it exists. And the government has done that for a very long time. And so has academia. I mean, we saw, congressmen on the left come out and say, right-wing violence is obviously greater than left-wing violence. Look at this study. And a couple of Twitter anons dug into the details of the study, and it turns out they didn't count half a dozen attacks that had taken place on the left. They simply ignored them, or in some cases, they attributed the attack to someone on the right, even though it was conducted by someone on the left. And we had that case, for example, with the firebombing of the governor's mansion in Pennsylvania, where even Governor Josh Shapiro himself failed to note that it was a left-wing individual who conducted that attack on behalf of the Palestinian ideology.
Unbelievable. Yeah. So first, what you're saying, we have to make the bureaucrats honest. We have to hold them accountable, and they have to have a category to actually acknowledge and see left-wing violence, because they don't acknowledge that whatsoever now, and this has been going on for a very long time. Okay, let's say we do that. Let's say they put out the memo, they change whatever they need to change, and they say, all right, now there is a category for left-wing extremism that you, as part of the law enforcement complex, are going to start paying attention to. What should they do next?
Well, I would argue that they should move to conduct a number of designations against Antifa-linked groups, primarily in Europe, but across the world. Now, you could argue, and I think it would be legitimate, for a single terrorism designation against Antifa as a foreign terrorist organization. The problem you're going to run into is that the way the U.S. government uses terrorism designations now is they designate the smallest possible group. So you'll see the United States government designate Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula and Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb and so on ad infinitum. So they spend their time designating the smallest possible group, even though they should all be covered by a larger designation. But if you try to designate just Antifa as a single entity or movement, what I suspect you'll find is that the bureaucrats will say, we don't know what that is. That's not a thing that exists. So the way I would approach it is to find a number of foreign Antifa groups that'll be more easily designated. The Germans, for example, just recently prosecuted a so-called hammer gang, which has conducted assaults against people across national borders for the past couple of years. Designate a group like that. Then you tie that group back to an international Antifa network, like, for example, the International Antifa Defense Fund or a similar group that spreads across national borders. Then you go after US-based groups that are also tied to that international network. And so you build a series of designations that way. I think that will, in the long run, be faster and more effective. Although if the Trump administration decides to go for the throat and ask for a foreign terrorism designation of Antifa, obviously I would support it.
Yeah, I see that book, Unmasking Antifa, in the background. I believe you had something to do with that. We've talked about Antifa a lot in the past, and now you have many people claiming this murder, this assassination, was at least Antifa adjacent when it comes to this trans or transvestite community that seems to be related to the killer. What you're saying, though, sounds like, take it internationally, then they can't deny it. The bureaucrats within the government, I want to point this out to the audience, can't deny it, and you build a case from there and you work back to Antifa in America because they have refused so long to acknowledge that any of these groups are actually existing or a thing, a real entity. So that leads to just a bigger problem in general, which is if the bureaucracy is loaded with people who have been trained their entire adult life to find far-right extremism under every rock, will they ignore the violence of the left? How in the hell are you going to get those people to turn the train around and focus on the actual killers amongst us?
Well, I think there are good people inside federal law enforcement who want to do the right thing, who want to make cases, against the people who are fomenting violence on the streets, who want to make cases against the people who are targeting federal law enforcement. For that matter, I think those people exist inside federal law enforcement. I think they would do a good job if they were allowed to do it. I think most of the resistance actually comes probably from middle and upper management in some of these bureaucracies. I think your street agents would be very excited to make these cases. But the question is, are they getting access to good information? Do they have access to analysts and experts who can describe for them what they are seeing? That I was actually extremely pleased when Stephen Crowder came out with that ATF memo that described the shell casings as anti-fascist ideology. That was absolutely correct. And that would be a statement that would be very difficult to get elements of the federal bureaucracy to admit. But we saw them do it in that case, and I was pleased that they did and that they were so straightforward about it. So I think you can change the corner on this or turn the corner on this. But it has to be clear that these are the cases that they're going to get supported. If you want to be making the big cases and helping your career, this is what the administration thinks is a threat to national security and is a threat to the nation. And we're going to push these big cases. We're going to get wins. We're going to get prosecutions. And if you want a part of that, these are the targets you should be going after. And I think that could be convincing to members in federal law enforcement, as long as the Trump administration is willing to do the hard work of figuring out these categories, figuring out these designations and definitions, and operating accordingly.
Well, there will be a lot more to talk about with you, Kyle, as coming days and weeks unfold, and we will check in with you again, I'm sure. Thank you so much for that.
My pleasure.